Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, sponsored by the members of the Grand Theft World community at grandtheftworld.com. October 9th, this is episode 101, One Nation Under Blackmail. We're going to be getting into this book tonight, just volume one. We're going to have special guest Whitney Webb, and we got a lot to talk about tonight. In this week in history, in Grand Theft World history, Elon Musk decided he wants to buy Twitter. He was about to go to discovery in a lawsuit. He decided he actually wanted to buy Twitter, which is a big turnaround. This has been going on for like 6 months if you've been following the story. And then Twitter said afterwards, I don't think we want to sell to you. So now there's like another blockage in that whole thing going on. Zelensky came out this week. He called for a NATO nuclear preemptive strike on Russia, which is like the least strategic military decision in history or request in history. It's kind of silly, but it could end up with a big catastrophe domino effect that could affect a far broader spectrum than just folks in his own country. So we better look at that. Jeffrey Sachs came out this week. We talked about Nord Stream blowing up. It's a pipeline. It blew up in 4 places. We talked a little bit about it last week because it was a breaking story. Well, this week, Jeffrey Sachs, Columbia economist, came out and said he thinks the United States did it. Now, that's not my claim. That's Jeffrey Sachs. We're going to get to listen to his explanation behind that tonight. But that's an interesting story because the people bringing us all this green agenda potentially just committed the big eco-terror act of the year, and they want you to go eat the bugs. So there's a contradiction in that thinking. We'll break that open tonight. Also, it looks like might be Hunter Biden could get indicted, not for all the salacious things on his laptop, but things that are boring like tax fraud and other things his dad might have been involved in. So we're going to look into that. Also, the Alex Jones trial number 2 is almost to a conclusion. The jury is out. The plaintiffs are asking for a range between $550 million to $7.8 billion from Jones. So we're going to take a look at that story as it's unfolding. And aforementioned, we have guest Whitney Webb who's going to talk about her book tonight. And last but not least, Del Bigtree of the High Wire broke some news about the CDC and their V-Safe software. They've been tracking people through the vaccine stages of COVID. And his legal team has gotten together like a FOIA request lawsuit situation where they got some data. And they've made some software so we can crawl the data and actually get some real science going on in these decision-making processes. It doesn't look as sparkly as they advertised it to us. So we're going to have to take a look at that story as well. So we'll be here for the next 6 or 7 hours. We'll be smashing this week's current events into historical context, going on some deep dives. We also have this little juicy tidbit, the centennial issue of Foreign Affairs, The Age of Uncertainty. So we'll be sure to take a good look at that this evening as well. Let's kick it off, though, with Luke Rudowski from We Are Change and thebestpoliticalshirts.com. And let's get the show on the road.
Going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? What? I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on the telephone, rapidly rising, and with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's why reflected in the NHDI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the footnote. We're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's autocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway. My mind's going blank now.
Now that right there is definitely a top jam, and if only he was as good as an auto-tuned singer as he was a president, maybe we wouldn't be facing the prospects of World War III and economic calamity. But hey, you can't have it all. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Rudowski here of WeAreChange.org, And man, oh man, is there some absolutely wild and crazy news to get into today, especially after the overtly aggressive moves being made by PayPal that are now being met with the hashtag bankrupt PayPal. Why is this happening? What are the larger implications here? What's the deeper, more sinister ties to PayPal? Well, we're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more, as well as, of course, the deteriorating situation in Ukraine right now, as, of course, we've just had a major escalation, a major moment in this proxy conflict that, of course, is going to be worth talking about, mentioning, and discussing in its longer implications, as it looks like we're just in the beginning phases of a very serious situation that's only going to get a lot more serious from here. Now, the clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast was done by somebody. I don't know who did this. If you know who did this, let me know down in the comment section below so I could attribute and, of course, link their work in the description, as, of course, this auto-tune of all the greatest and latest Joe Biden gaffes were put together and made into a music video that is absolutely hilarious. We only played you a small segment, and as soon as we find this creator, we of course will be linking to their incredible, amazing work down in the description below. As of course I think right now it is extremely important to have art, to have music, to have self-expression that of course represents a picture and perspective of the world that makes us contemplate our existence on this planet, which could only happen if ideas and expressions aren't limited, which is exactly what PayPal is doing, and why right now bankrupt PayPal is being shared around widely on a lot of big tech social media circles. Why is this happening? Well, PayPal just a few days ago announced a new policy that they were going to be implementing that would fine users $2,500 from their accounts retroactively if they shared the wrong expressions and ideas. I kid you not. PayPal literally bragged about this new implementation of their policy, which they were very proud of a few days ago, saying, hey, you advocate for misinformation, you present a risk to a user's well-being, well, we're going to steal money from you, specifically $2,500. Now, what is misinformation? What is this safety or well-being? What are these generalized terms exactly going to mean? Well, of course, PayPal kept them vague because when they keep them vague, they, of course, could influence, stifle ideas, stifle expression, all the while imposing a totalitarian social media hellscape where people are too afraid to even speak out against the status quo, mainly because PayPal's going to rob them. Who's going to be deciding what was hurting other people's feelings? What was their understanding of misinformation? Well, it was their sole discretion to decide whatever they wanted it to be. You present an idea or thought that is objectionable, you discriminate against someone's gender identity, as PayPal openly claimed, and just like a thug running after a grandma's purse in the middle of the night down the street, they openly proclaimed and bragged, yes, we're going to be these future robbers, up until they got a massive backlash and decided to do a 180-degree reverse turn course, saying, oh no, this was an error. We made a mistake here. We will not be stealing your money in the middle of the night. Oopsie daisy, there was a little coinky-dink here, yes. Which, of course, a lot of people are being very skeptical of, as, of course, PayPal, as a company that many people argue has a monopoly on financial transactions on the internet, has already been abusing its power, its authority, and punishing people, deplatforming people, debanking people for simply also expressing political ideas that they did not like. As of course, already under existing law, especially here in the United States, PayPal, as a private company, has the ability to implement whatever policy it wants, as argued unironically by many leftists and socialists. As of course, the mega monopoly corporation has already shut down a free speech union, anti-war voices, independent media, artists, and other comedians who dared to joke about ideas and express ideas that PayPal didn't like. They have also partnered and worked with discredited organizations like the SPLC that were sued many times in court for their slander, for them deliberately trying to hurt people's reputation by lying about them, while pushing for their censorship, deplatforming, and debanking. This, again, highly discredited organizations with ties to, of course, a lot of sinister billionaires bankrolling them, that has predominantly attacked people's ideas, causing real-life harm, is now working with PayPal as, of course, to weed out and debank individuals who dared to express ideas that the SPLC didn't like. Again, this is not an organization known for its accuracy. They have gotten many things wrong for the detriment to many individuals, to the point where they had to settle in court many times for their clearly aggressive political actions that went over the top. And this is why PayPal working with them is many reasons why hashtag bankrupt PayPal is now being shared around widely on big tech social media, with online commentators like Jack Posobiec saying, quote, "No one is buying their walk back. We know what their plan is. They're just mad they got caught," as essentially a social credit score is what a lot of very powerful multinational corporations and big banks, along with centralized digital currencies, is what a lot of people are after. And the best way to implement such a draconian, over-the-top, centralized system is, of course, destroy any kind of voices who have opposition for it, spread disinformation, spread propaganda, spread lies, while, of course, censor individuals like even the Surgeon General of Florida, that just had one of his tweets deleted from his platform on Twitter. All of this as, of course, the White House, along with the federal police departments of this government, FBI, are going around big tech social media platforms and censoring stories about the president's son. This as we're also finding out that the White House is spending $265,000 on staff inside of their administration to deflect against the very serious allegations against Hunter Biden, highlighting another clear form of misinformation and propaganda from the administration that literally wants to control the internet, and in many instances already has been controlling. As we recently found out, the White House has been censoring and deplatforming former New York Times journalists, satire websites, and other individuals who dared to, of course, question their defunct bankrupt ideas. And this is why, with all this censorship, with bankrupt PayPal going on right now, we have just launched an alternative to PayPal, specifically Stripe. We're going to have another alternative available for you when it comes to, of course, signing up to LukeUncensored.com, a platform that, by the way, also gives people exclusive access to t-shirts and merch. Since, between the left and the right, which I think is more important than ever, especially since, politicians like to keep arbitrary borders and have their poor people fight their other poor people, as of course many people agree that war is a racket. People don't want to hurt each other. People don't want to kill each other. But for some strange reason, when politicians tell the poorest people in their country to do so, they somehow follow orders and do this, which is happening right now in Ukraine, which also represents the larger proxy war between the East and the West that has been building up for a very long time. There's video footage of war hawk neocon Lindsey Graham and John McCain in Ukraine promising an offensive against the Russians, and the words were more prophetic than, of course, just promising, as we're facing the possibility of some really bad things. Russia is a nuclear power, Ukraine is not, the United States is, and as Elon Musk just said moments ago, quote, nuclear war probability is rising rapidly, and he is not wrong for saying this. The United States just also bought a nuclear emergency drug to the tune of $290 million for themselves. Will you get that drug in case there's a nuclear war? No. Are you going to be going into the bunkers of these multinational corporations, these bankers and politicians that they have set up all around the country? No. And as everyone else sees this as a clear threat to humanity, some see this as an opportunity, as recently the BlackRock CEO allegedly came out saying that this current war between Russia and Ukraine, the proxy war with the United States involved here, could, quote, boost centralized digital currencies, particularly also stablecoins. And as a lot of people are looking out for their own personal investments, as people are trying to make opportunities out of this, as of course companies are selling weapons, we still have to understand that there is a real life human cost to all of this, and that of course is usually put on the burden of some of the poorest people in countries, the poorest people who of course are forced to fight each other, to hurt each other, kill each other, which is just absolutely insane. The insanity we saw a bigger perspective of when a key piece of Russian infrastructure was recently attacked over the weekend, an attack that also killed 3 innocent civilians. This key piece of Russian infrastructure also, is a major supply line to Crimea, the Russian-held territory that the Russian government has annexed there a few years ago, a territory that Ukraine sees as theirs and Russia sees as a strategic location for, of course, their military and their country. This as today, Russian divers have been deployed to examine the foundation of this bridge after, of course, hearing the possibilities that there was also explosive-laden boats used on this particular attack. The Kremlin is also talking about the possibility of a truck bomb. What happened here? Well, we're still finding out. But of course, many people who are behind the Ukrainian war effort are celebrating this bombing of this key bridge, a miracle bridge as previously described by the president of Russia, as the Ukrainian government has just issued commemorative postage stamps with this particular attack. Now, of course, this attack also highlights how the Russian government is not able to protect their infrastructure, which will also, of course, probably signal a Russian attack on Ukrainian infrastructure, which already could be underway, as we're finding out that the Ukrainian nuclear power plant is having some of its energy being cut, and I think it's fair to say that we could definitely expect more Russian counterattacks on Ukrainian infrastructure from here. This, as of course, the president of Ukraine has said that somehow Russia is the country involved here when it comes to bombing their own infrastructure. Yes, I kid you not. Just when you thought the propaganda couldn't get any more crazier, as of course we have the Western corporate media saying that Russia now is blowing up their pipelines. Now we have the Ukrainian president saying that Russia is now blowing up their key pieces of infrastructure. Now, the reason that Zelensky is saying this, saying specifically that one of Russia's security factions was behind this blast, was particularly done so to show that Putin is in trouble. And as of right now, this is obviously a theory that hasn't been proven, as it looks like Zelensky is trying to put in a wedge between the FSB and Defense Ministry. Russia hasn't even assigned blame yet for this larger attack, but I think it's pretty clear who benefits from all of this. Is Zelensky telling the truth here? Well, face value, this looks absolutely kind of shocking. Is this a form of mental war? Well, who knows? Any form of war is just absolutely stupid in my opinion. And as we mentioned previously before, truth is the first casualty of war. Everyone's just looking out for themselves, and in reality, the people are the ones paying the price of political ambitions of politicians. And as we're just getting the latest photos and videos, specifically in Syria, human beings are not naturally made to maim and destroy other human beings. There's a reason a lot of them have PTSD afterwards, and that's because it's not inherent in human beings to extinguish life for the pure benefit of an individual. For survival, that's yet another question. But to me, all these concepts, all these ideas, all this lunacy could be stopped with the right ability of individuals just being able to communicate with each other. But powerful interests, bankers, big tech, social media, multinational corporations are standing in the way of that, and that's why I think that's some bull crap. And if you agree, share this video with your friends and family members. If you thought anything I said was wrong or anything was incorrect, or if you thought I got something that I thought was true but you thought wasn't.
All right, excellent reporting from Luke Radowski. And yeah, Russia has been maligned a lot, maybe self-earned. Let's go back in history a little bit. Great Russian novelist Dostoevsky, as an example, lived at the end of the 1800s, which is the end of the 19th century. And he had taken a look at these utopian factions that were growing up in the mid 1800s. And he looked at those utopias as people's way of trying to avoid the legitimate suffering of actually self-supporting and living life, right? You expect technology and robots and servants and all these other things that come along with technocracy, transhumanism, all these things are pushing. It's not really making a utopia. It can't make a utopia. Utopia is not, it means from the Greek, nowhere, not here. It doesn't exist for a reason.
It's an imaginative panacea. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's an imaginative panacea. And you can understand why at the time, because people were struggling just to survive. They didn't have the infrastructure technology that we take for granted today.
Well, and this idea of utopia, so Dostoevsky treats it as like that's a phenomenon, a layer of your thinking of development, but then you learn enough to get past that. And so then a lot of his characters take on the suffering, and the issue is what it means to be human.
Right.
But it takes effort to do things. There is cause and effect. To travel from one place to another, it's going to take effort. Can you use technology to expedite that effort? Sure can. Does it come at the cost, right? But it also helps to think about things like the green agenda and all these other things that drives NATO's energy activity over in that Russia situation. And there's a lot that we could change about it. We'll talk about that throughout the episode tonight, because we do have some good evidence on where the polluters are, who the people are that are the major polluters. Maybe they're corporate people. We'll check that out, because maybe we can put dampen that down. But I don't think we have to eat bugs. I don't think we have to lose our ability to travel freely, or to be able to afford gas, or to be able to afford food or lodging or any of these other things. I think you have to balance these things, and to cut off humanity in order to save the planet and get carbon net zero and that sort of thing. I think that should be looked at and re-examined. And let's get to
Sounds like another
root cause.
strange...
And where's the evidence for this?
They say,
oh,
their
it's in the
version of
science.
utopia.
That is their version.
Oh, I see.
And it doesn't exist. What they're pushing is an unreality. Again,
an imaginative panacea for their own wayward and absurd thinking.
Well, they think by blowing up Nord Stream 2 that they can get, American supply monopoly, over there, right, on Europe at a time when they'd have to endure whatever price hikes and price gouging because it's winter coming up, right? So they thought they had a captive market. And apparently Putin said he's got another pipe he can still deliver to Germany. Do they want it or not? So there's still things unfolding in that situation. Still
competition. Going back to the utopia thing, Carl Jung also researched from a different angle, from more of a psychologist. Well, Dostoevsky was sort of a psychologist in his own right, so to speak, in a literary form. But Carl Jung mentioned that for him, it was the archetype of the myth of the golden age. You see this in almost all world religions, this golden age from which man fell from a state of grace, especially in the Abrahamic religions, but certainly in the Eastern religions, there's intimations of this sort of concept as well. And it's sort of, it's a puerile and sort of inane and sort of, I would say, like a childlike fantasy of dealing with the hardships of life. And in a way, it's needed, I think, to establish an absolute form of hope. But it's when taken to extreme forms, it can become sort of out of control. And I see Rich just entered my studio, so he must be looking for some sort of book or something. Okay. Do you want me to change the camera angle?
No, we just needed to clean up that shot. That's all.
Okay. Oh, my bad. I was like, so you get to see it live. We're in a new summon. Studio One? We call this something like that. I think it's called Studio One. I was up in Autonomy Studios, helping to rearrange, build a computer, get everything ready for the new season that's upcoming for Autonomy. So we got a couple different camera angles that I'll be trying out tonight for everyone, and seeing if any of these cameras sort of crap out during the night. Hopefully,
we're going to work out after we make sure they don't crap out. We'll make sure they're color balanced and properly exposed and things like that. But
looking good so far. Everything's looking pretty happy with the progress we've made. But it is interesting. It's an aspect of the human condition. Carl Jung would argue that this myth of the golden age is an archetype, something that's a universal aspect of the human condition. But when we try to reify, to make thing-like, or to instantiate, take an abstraction and put it into reality, that's where it gets messy. That's where it becomes problematic. And that's where there's a lot of blood on one's hands. And
would that be like if they had a high-minded idea like a Great Reset, and then they tried to bring it in and shoehorn it into reality? In the midst of that, they do this Ukraine situation.
Correct.
So that NATO can get the drop on Russia.
That would be actually a very good mechanism by which the World Economic Forum and these other mechanisms for global control could instantiate, there's that word again, their high ideals for the rest of the world. That would be exactly right. And that's one of the layers, I call it the sort of meta layer on top of this whole geopolitical situation, from which we really should be observing and critiquing and analyzing this situation. Too often people, I think, are looking at it from the left and right dichotomy, if you will, not left and right in the sense of American politics, but from the Ukrainian or Russian side only. And yes, we could talk about NATO expansion and all these other, the Minsk Accords from the Maidan coup and all, Crimea and Sevastopol and what happened after the Maidan coup when it comes to Azov Battalion attacking the Russian Donbass region, the eastern region of the Ukraine, or it's not Russian, excuse me, the eastern region of the Ukraine. There's a lot going on. I understand that. I understand it's a hyper complex situation, but above that, it seems to give a lot of precedence to what the World Economic Forum and other geopolitical leaders and machinations in regards to climate change, climate lockdowns that we mentioned last week on the show, in fact, seems to give them a lot of leadway for that, a lot of leverage. And that's what I'm most concerned about. And people are sort of getting caught in the forest, so to speak, and don't see, or getting caught in seeing only the trees and don't realize the larger forest in which they're existing, this entire geopolitical milieu and the implications for what, these transhumanist ideologues are attempting to instantiate. So,
all right. So before we get too deep into things, let's go to Christy Lee with This Week in Media Malfeasance and see what these people in the transhumanist milieu have been up to this week.
Ye appears on Tucker this week.
And we are in a battle with the media. Like, the majority of the media has a godless agenda, and their jokes are not working. This whole like, oh, Ye's crazy and all these things, they don't work.
So even a billionaire Grammy Award-winning rap artist can spot media malfeasance, bringing you what's ignored, sensationalized, misleading, or just plain false for the first week of October. Mainstream media is still trying to twist coverage of a natural disaster to make Florida's governor look bad. Now the AP is using old news to mislead readers and viewers. The AP tweeted Thursday that the many residents on Florida's Pine Island have stayed put for days without electricity and other resources while hoping the lone bridge to the mainland is repaired, and then linked to an article published 4 days earlier. Problem is, the bridge had already been fixed. After getting called out with tweets like, "The bridge is repaired, stop spreading misinformation," AP ended up deleting its misleading tweet. Again, it's strange these little mishaps only seem to happen to one side. ABC Action News accused Governor DeSantis of halting hurricane supply operations as a result of his presence there in Arcadia, Florida. That claim was debunked shortly after by even the DeSoto County Sheriff, who tweeted that operations in his county stayed rolling all the entire time. And Politico is slammed after this tweet, referring to the federal funds DeSantis has used as the president's wallet. Christina Pushaw, what is wrong with you? It's not the president's wallet. It is American taxpayers' money. Americans in any state hit by a disaster are entitled to federal disaster relief funds, whether or not you approve of the governor. The media disgusts me more every day. And you know what is making the aftermath of a natural disaster worse? That the propaganda puppets don't want to touch?
And we've had 4 looters that were arrested, I guess a couple days ago, and they need to be brought to justice, and we're not going to tolerate it. But 3 of the 4 are illegal aliens. And so these are people that are foreigners. They're illegally in our country. And not only that, they try to loot and ransack in the aftermath of a natural disaster. I mean, they should be prosecuted, but they need to be sent back to their home country. They should not be here at all.
Speaking of governors, here's a gubernatorial hopeful, a former news anchor, demonstrating just how to handle the media.
Tell me, abortion is effectively banned in the state right now. Tell me, is that something that you support?
I support saving as many lives as possible. And what I really want to know, and I've been waiting, I tune into you guys all the time. I want to know where Katie Hobbs stands, but I never hear you guys ask her that. I'm pro-life. My plan would be that every woman who walks into an abortion clinic know that there are options out there. They don't have to choose that. There's families who would love to adopt a baby. And right now, the way it's been going, they go in and they only have one option.
That's it.
Nobody tells them that there's other options. We want to help our women. If they're afraid, we want to help them. We want to give women health care, and I want to help people. But I really challenge you, and I'm happy to get back to you on this, when you find out where Katie Hobbs stands, because let me tell you where she stands. She supports abortion right up until birth and after birth.
That's right.
She supports if a baby survives a botched abortion, that baby die on a cold metal tray.
True.
And none of you ever try to get her to talk about her stance. So get back to me after you do.
Thank
and
you.
tell her.
Speaking of where's Katie Hobbs, she was a no-show at a Hispanic town hall as the podium next to Kari Lake was left empty. The media is now forced to report on the Hunter Biden investigation, and they look very uncomfortable doing it.
Number of months that they have a chargeable case against Hunter Biden. But it's important to remember, charging decisions are not made by agents. Charging decisions are made by prosecutors at the Justice Department.
Does this have anything to do with the laptop?
So it's really unclear. We can't tell at this point how important or unimportant the laptop has been to this federal investigation.
But commentators like Mark Levin say feds targeting Hunter for tax crime and gun charges is just throwing a bone, ignoring more consequential crimes that allegedly involve his father. In fact, Hunter's former business partner, Tony Bobulinski, has resurfaced and says he had presented evidence to the FBI that the Bidens committed multiple felonies.
I haven't heard from them since.
At all?
No. Nor have my lawyers.
No communication whatsoever?
No.
Since before the 2020 election?
Correct.
That's shocking.
Shocking, yeah, that would be one adjective, yeah.
Tell us about Tim Tebow.
I didn't interact with him, my lawyers
Right.
did, and had extensive discussions, obviously.
Is feds now leaking they have enough to indict Hunter a pretext to justify another politically motivated Trump attack? Becker News. New York Times report suggests the FBI is preparing to raid Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago again. Speaking of the New York Times, it was blasted for a hit piece on so-called Trump-supporting conspiracy theorists questioning ties between a CEO of an election software company and servers in China. And then, oh look, the next day, the same author had to report that CEO was arrested for allegedly stealing data and keeping it where? You guessed it, China. So the theories of conspiracy weren't so unfounded after all. The New York Times also had to admit this week that top surgeries for children are on the rise. And by top surgeries, we mean mastectomies for biological girls or breast implants for biological boys. Dissenter. We now have child body mutilation centers disguised as children's hospitals calling themselves gender clinics, which do nothing except strip children of their childhood innocence and propel them into a life of confusion and regret. And if it's not enough to terrorize young children into adult conversations to confuse them, terrorizing them in general, traumatizing preschoolers in a Mississippi daycare. These people are evil. Meanwhile, the Elon Musk versus Twitter soap opera continues. In short, Elon Musk offered to buy Twitter. The little birdie employees lost their minds. He ended up pulling back his offer. They demanded he buy. Now the offer is back on the table and they're losing their minds all over again. Teslarati.com tweets, Twitter refuses Elon Musk's renewed $44 billion bid, to which Elon Musk responds, plot twist. And I'll leave you with this. Finally, some liberal late-night shows are acknowledging that we sure do have Kamala crazy.
My fellow Americans, words have many meanings, and sometimes instead of conveying our meaning, they can suggest other meanings.
When we talk about the children of the community, they are children of the community.
Well, we are the United States of America because we are united. And we are states.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time. Right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
For more exclusive content, subscribe to my Locals community, ChristyLeeTV.locals.com.
All right. Now we've got yet another perspective on how the news unfolded this week. I forgot about that Ye interview with Tucker. That was interesting. It's also interesting how he rebranded, like it happens to be the last part of his name because he formerly known as Kanye, now known as Ye. But if you think about it, when he enters a room and everyone goes, yay, he might have just wanted to hear that. which might lend some credence to some of those other theories. But very fascinating character, outspoken iconoclast of our age. Yay. He had this big talk with Tucker Carlson. I don't think we have time to play any of those clips tonight, but it's out there. It happened this past week. It's something we could note in the news, especially. What do you think, Tony?
Sounds like you just wanted some sort of, it's like a video game where you have a theme song in the background when you're playing, like Mario or something like that, which I was playing a lot with your son this past week. Maybe you just wanted like a theme song sort of thing going in the background. I don't know. Like that's why he renamed himself. That's what I was thinking. Maybe he has a song he's playing that has yay in it all the time.
Yeah.
And as he walks into a different place or a different room or just even to the bathroom, he's like,
we'll have to get a yay clip on the soundboard
into that
for next week. We're still trying to circle back to find that Saki.
He's an interesting figure, most certainly. I know he when Trump became president, he ended up going to the White House. Is that famous football player that also,
and yet his wife was so close to the Clintons. You would learn through that interview.
Yeah, and
interesting, but like,
isn't it ex-wife now? Didn't they get
ex-wife, formerly known as his wife?
Right, and if I remember correctly, Trump pardoned one of her friends. And so she actually had nothing really bad to say about Trump. And it was for a non-violent drug.
Yeah, she was lobbying to get people out of prison.
Yeah.
Which is a noble
particularly for non-violent drug offenses, from my understanding. So I remember a lot of people would question her on late night television shows. And she's like, he pardoned my one friend. I had good conversations with him. It didn't, experience any sort of strange racism or belligerence on behalf of, or wanton sort of disregard for moral scrupulousness. So it's an interesting sort of phenomenon. Now the question with Ye is he certainly has had some bouts of very strange situations in regards to not only depression but psychotic episodes. And I know he ended up at this very famous UCLA psych ward at UCLA that is known for dealing with a lot of famous celebrities. And some people have implicated it as part of an occult / MK Ultra style, which is out there and I don't agree with, but I've seen some very strange murmurings on the highways and byways of the internet in regards to what's going on with him. But at the same time, maybe he's having a reaction and realizing much of his life has been a facade and he's coming to wake up to the reality of, what's going on. Who knows? But right now, he's certainly an iconoclast and a fascinating individual.
Well, in this search to see, because I think Kanye's he's a reactor in the system. Let's take a look at the system. The system kind of has developed this mass formation psychosis. And we were all looking at a clip earlier today. And it's interesting how we talked last week about history may not repeat, but it sure does rhyme, which is a Mark Twain quote. And in this theme that we're going to unfold for you right now, what we're experiencing today might not be that dissimilar from what we experienced in the 1950s. Now, last week, I did mention that Eisenhower article. I think we read it at the end of the episode about freedom and differing people's ideas being part of America. But we're also going to take a look right now into the past. It's a little time machine episode. We're going to go back to the early 1950s. We're going to read or we're going to listen to an article that's been illustrated and brought to life through video. So there's narration, there's snappy editing to this, but really it was some typed up words on paper in 1951. And to my knowledge, it wasn't published publicly. And it was amidst the papers of a relative of a friend of mine. And he had sent it to me and I read it and I was like, this is interesting. And it's definitely going on, but it's like hard to get that information to people. So he took it upon himself to hire some voice artistry, and he does a very good job narrating. And my buddy did the editing himself, so don't hate on this editing. He might have voted for Trump. I don't know. You can't tell. And the words that you're going to hear for the next 20 minutes are going to unfold a picture that is very similar to what's going on today. That mass formation psychosis, Matthias Desmet and McDonald.
Mark McDonald from California, I think around the UCLA area. And
he wrote
Matthias
the United
Desmet.
States of Fear and Desmet's book. I don't have yet, but I have.
Yeah, I do want to get that because he gets
him
a lot into the history of, especially in behaviorism, apparently. So a couple of GTW members have inquired as to whether or not we'd be willing to get him on. So I kind of want to read his book and see how much of the history he gets into to see if we can find a bridge.
Yeah, so those ideas aren't new to listeners of this show.
Right.
But the ideas we're going to juxtapose them to right now from the 1950s, surprisingly, strikingly similar. And you might even observe that much of what was observed back then, not by a clinical psychiatrist, but by an investigative journalist, much of what was observed back then is also still the root cause of what's going on today. And because it wasn't fixed 20 years before I was born, it's still going on today. And if we don't,
it's been exacerbated at this point. It's much worse.
It's gone like plaid. They've gone plaid at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to watch Spaceballs to get that one, but they've gone plaid, sir. So
let's go. It's plaid.
And this clip, you can pass it around. It's not proprietary to this show. It's on Rumble. We're going to show you where it's posted, and LD is going to let it rip right now. And we're going to review it together with the lens of listening to history, but also thinking about, is this going on still today? And what can we do about it? More importantly, let's check it out.
The greatest danger to the world today is not the situation in Korea, not a third world war, not the atomic bomb, although all of these dangers are of great magnitude. The greatest danger is mental ill health. I am not speaking of the illnesses which confine hundreds of thousands of persons to the state hospitals. I am speaking of the mental illnesses which afflict physically healthy individuals, and particularly those in places of high responsibility. The great danger in connection with these diseases is that they are contagious. They take on epidemic form and spread rapidly. An epidemic of the manic depressive psychosis and of paranoia is building up in the United States today, and it can reach very dangerous proportions. The center of dissemination is in Washington. Another center is in Moscow. The diseases are not of the acute variety that require hospitalization. They are of a subclinical degree, but the personality characteristics of the disease are developed to a very high intensity. The danger is not to the individuals affected, but to the country as a whole and to the world, because the mentally sick individuals are in a position of power to inflict the results of their disordered thinking on the country and on the world, and plunge us into another world war, the result of which will be a worldwide epidemic wave of mental illness, the effects of which will be worse than defeat by any enemy. It rarely happens that a person suffers from a deficiency of one vitamin. If there is a deficiency of one, there is likely to be a deficiency of others. And the real trouble is likely not to be associated with a lack of vitamins in the diet at all, but to something more fundamental. So it is with mental disorders. It is rarely that a person suffers from just one. He usually has a mixture of all of them. Psychiatrists are well aware that any mental disease category they set up includes aspects of all others. Mental disease is a matter of degree. It is probable that everyone, at some time, perhaps for only a period of minutes, has suffered from some degree of mental derangement. There is a very wide range of mental states associated with mental illnesses. They range from conditions which are only slight variations from normal that we would not think of associating with mental disease, to very acute situations in which the mental and physical powers deteriorate. There is a very direct connection between mind and body. Unsatisfactory conditions in the body can cause disturbed mental states, and disturbed mental states can cause physical illnesses. Persons with the manic depressive psychosis usually die from heart conditions, and schizophrenics usually die of tuberculosis. There are many diseased conditions which are not normally called a disease. The achieving of great wealth is, I believe, the symptom of a very serious mental disorder. We do not treat our millionaires as victims of a mental disease, but they are. They are also a symbol of economic ill health. A person can acquire wealth in other forms, excess personal power, for example. We call them individuals with powerful personalities. They dominate others. We glorify them. They become leaders. No individual should dominate another. If one does, he is taking a power which does not belong to him. The fact that one individual is willing to dominate another is an indication of mental illness on the part of the person doing the dominating. He is not a leader, he is a driver, practically a slave owner. These dominators, working through mental or physical powers, should be incarcerated in a hospital the instant they show their first symptoms. Leadership and cooperation is something entirely different. This should be on an equality basis. We are placing the high values on the wrong qualities. We need a new basic philosophy. We are now facing a condition that requires something more definite than theories. We are facing a condition in which nations are suffering from mental illness, and the world is mentally ill. A great many individuals are mentally ill. As nations become ill, more and more of their citizens will become ill. Nations become ill when small groups of individuals in strategic governmental positions manifest mental illness in their thinking and in their actions. The actions of less than 1,000 mentally ill individuals in Washington can inflict mental illness of a serious degree on the great bulk of the entire population of the country. While the great majority of the people are still within the normal sane state, we can cure the Washington situation. If we fail to curb the Washington manics, the future presents a very gloomy aspect. The Washington Group, from the president, his executive family, the constellation of bureaucrats, the Congress, and a host of minor executives, are suffering as a group, and in most cases as individuals, from the manic drive of the manic depressive psychosis and the persecution grandeur complex of paranoia. There is another group in Moscow suffering from exactly the same mental disorders, with the same effects on the Russian people. Because these small groups are in strategic positions of power, they may plunge the world into World War III. The effects on us of a victory for Moscow, or the effect on Russians of a victory for us, from a purely military or economic point of view, would be of very small importance compared to the mental illness which war would inflict on the whole world. The manic phase in Washington at the present time is a direct result and part of the manic phase which brought about World War II, persists there. Among the people as a whole in this country, the manic phase of World War II subsided and was followed by the depressed phase. They are unsold on world wars. The manic phase, however, has been built up twice in this country within a generation, and the manics in Washington believe it could be built up again, and they are trying to put it across. If we let them do it, we are crazier than they are. Let me describe the manic phase of the manic depressive psychosis. During periods of elation, the patient apparently reasons in his own mind as follows: my life is blameless, my conduct praiseworthy. I have met my social and other obligations in exemplary fashion. My superiority is firmly established. My fellow men must say to me, well done. But there remains much for me to do. All I need is more room for action. I must telephone or telegraph my orders. I am destined to become the chosen leader of the people. Thus do these manics present a bluff, shameless front. As elation advances, they conduct themselves in a swaggering, boastful, and vainglorious manner. They crave opportunity for showing off. They long for an audience. They feel as blameless as a babe unborn. Nevertheless, as much as in the depressed state, the manic is dependent upon the group for his satisfaction. Without company, he is unsatisfied and ineffective. The mild forms of emotional excitement and accelerated motor activity are characterized by very simple disturbances of thinking in association with emotional exhilaration. There is very little distortion of the content of the thought. The isolated acts and idea expression of such patients as concerns a given thought do not department much from what would be normal for them. The pathology in these cases is the entire ensemble of thinking and acting. These people get up early in the morning, their minds swarming with business enterprises or schemes for pleasure. They are bright and cheerful, often singing. They perambulate around the house, quite indifferent to the fact that they are disturbing the slumbers of other members of the family. They are impatient of delay, are minutely concerned about whatever other member of the family is doing or should do, and tend to become irritable and impatient, or even to fly into a rage if they are crossed, or if their plans are frustrated. They are given to sending telegrams and special delivery letters because the ordinary mails are too slow. These communications being very numerous and verbose, they are quite likely to start out on a shopping tour and make many unnecessary purchases. During this stage of the disorder, they lead busy lives, talking, visiting, keeping luncheon engagements, telephoning, telegraphing, and writing. Appointments are made, postponed, and canceled. There is a tendency to give orders and then to modify or countermand them. The motor activity is sometimes almost incessant, walking from one room to another, up and down stairs, all the while manifesting great impatience with associates, subordinates, and servants. They are talkative and good-humored on the whole, unless they are thwarted or compelled to undergo delays. This stage of the disorder is characterized by irritability, impulsiveness, and egoism. The patient is elated and exhilarated and seems to be enjoying the best of health. the capacity for creative thinking and acting is impaired. The initial stage of manic elation makes its victims appear to be live wires. They tend to monopolize the conversation, are dogmatic in expressing their views. Their plans and schemes, while fairly rational, are never thoroughly thought out. They are inconsistent and changeable, intolerant of criticism, mildly sarcastic, or even rude. They do not seem to be fatigued after one of these days of activity. It should be borne in mind that in general, victims of this disorder are individuals of more than ordinary intelligence, who are usually very capable, highly efficient persons who occupy positions of authority and executive management. Among women, they are very often social leaders, club workers, and of similar type. Now let me say something about paranoia. We are interested in mostly the paranoid state of the manic depressive psychosis. There are two types, but that can be mixed in one individual. One, the persecution type, in which the victim finds himself in danger from imagined enemies. Two, grandiose type, which is characterized by persistent delusions of self-importance. An authority states, the delusions are permanent, and the prognosis is very unfavorable. Paranoia is not associated with other psychotic categories, is categorized not only by insidious development, but by a lasting and unshakable delusional system in association with our mental status, which is otherwise quite clear and logical, so that aside from a delusional trend, the patient's thoughts, life, and conduct are fairly normal. This condition was once called monomania. 2/3 of the cases appear in the fourth decade, 30 to 40. Suspicious, envious, and jealous individuals, most likely to suffer from this disease. They judge others by themselves. There is no cure for this condition. Extreme state is one in which an individual is always fleeing from imagined enemies, distrusting food, friends, family, suspicious that every sound is an attack aimed at him, that everyone who looks at him is a spy, prying into his affairs. His beliefs, ideas are being stolen. Suspicion is frequently directed at lodges and religions. The current form is directed at a political ideology, both in Russia and in this country. In this country, the paranoics among the individuals of executive, legislative, and administrative responsibility see communists as the hidden enemy. In Russia, the communists see the capitalists as their devils. In World War I, we made Kaiser Wilhelm the devil from whom we were in danger. In World War II, Hitler and his Nazis were the devil whom we were taught to fear. In the planned World War III, Stalin and his communists are the devil. The formula is the same. The first two wars, proclaimed as a means of bringing peace to the world, were totally unsuccessful. A third war would be equally unsuccessful. The formula is definitely wrong. Only a mentally sick population in the United States could permit its government to try that formula again. All of you are old enough to remember how we were aroused to a mighty resentment by Kaiser Wilhelm's remark that me und Gott were united to bring Germany cultural ideas to the world. Just last night, President Truman, in addressing a military drive group in Washington, declared, "We are doing what God intended us to accomplish, to take the leadership to ensure peace in the world." It would be very interesting to know just when and how Mr. Truman learned that God intended us to do that. I would like to know the circumstances of the revelation. I would like to know just what God told Mr. Truman. The truth is, God did not tell Mr. Truman anything. Mr. Truman has undertaken the task of speaking for God. That act on the part of Mr. Truman is just as pathological as those that are spoken by many an individual incarcerated in a state hospital. That is the grandeur, the Messiah complex in Mr. Truman, the paranoid delusion of self-importance. Mr. Truman is, probably, not a bit more pathological than the host of other manics with which he is surrounded, all suffering from the Red Devil persecution complex intensified by their manic psychosis. We have fought 2 wars to give the people of the world the right to self-determination in choosing their type of government. And now we are coldly projecting a war against Russia because a group in Washington has decided that they don't like the government in Russia and are going to kick it out fit into the picture of American ideals. I don't like communism. It is infantile, impractical, and does not provide the personal liberty that I demand. I don't think it is going to last long in Russia. Even if everyone in this country agreed with me in my antagonism to communism, that would still not give us the right to make war on Russia to drive out the communists. We can defeat communism in other ways. Mr. Truman has stated repeatedly that he made many efforts to restore peace, but every one of them was a warlike move. There is a saying that I learned as a child, and which I keep constantly in my mind. If you want to have a friend, be a friend. That advice works. We would get nowhere by discussing the details of the existing situation. What we will have to adopt is the technique of the wise policeman. A group of young fellows assemble to play a game. A friendly discussion leads to a disagreement on some point. The discussion gets warm, too warm. The young fellows start shaking their fists and taking off their coats to prepare for battle. The policeman decides the situation has gone far enough. He wades into the group. Break it up, fellow. Break it up and go home. He does not bother to find out who is wrong and who is right. He just breaks it up, scatters the group. That is what must be done to the Washington group. Have you noticed how many vacations Mr. Truman takes? I wonder if his doctor is playing the part of the wise cop. The best thing that could happen to the country would be to have all the manic group in Washington take a 5-year vacation, voluntary or request. That includes the Taft kind as well as the Truman kind. All of the Deweys throughout the country should be included. There is a better approach to our problems. God does not reveal himself to politicians and tell them to go to war. He does, however, reveal himself through his works. It is the task of science to learn about God through his works. This is being done, and the laws of science can be accepted as our closest approach to the laws of God. With this thought in mind, I have drawn up a decalogue. The Decalogue of Principles for Peace and Progress. 1. I live in a universe governed entirely by the laws of God, which are the laws of nature and the laws of science, that are as unchanging as the nature of God himself. These can be depended upon to operate in the same way at all times. They apply to all men and supply me with the basis for planning and living my life. They provide the pattern for peace and progress for all men, individually and collectively. 2. I will think and act in accordance with these laws and will speak only that which is true. 3. Truth can be attained within the range of our activities and is always in harmony with the laws of God. 4. There is adequate accommodation in this world to permit all men to live on a high level of comfort and luxury, if all make reasonable contributions to production and our resources are applied for human welfare, and if none is wasted in strife, for strife is impoverishing all men. 5. I am born to full possession of the entire universe and all it contains, including the whole earth and all the individuals in this world. The heavens are mine, and no spot on the earth is foreign territory to me. This can be truthfully spoken by all men. 6. The welfare of all men is my personal responsibility. For the task of administering the earth and the affairs of the human race, I have available the cooperative service of all men. This is true of all men. This principle operates to the end that all men achieve individual freedom to live their lives in the knowledge that they are safe from ill will and selfish imposition. 7. The world of thought is the mold into which actions are cast. I will well think of all men. Whenever and wherever I find men unable to reciprocate, men suffering from mortal or physical illnesses that prevent them from acting in accordance with the laws of God, I will render generous aid until they are able to achieve this harmony. 8. I will act only on the fullest possible knowledge of truth. I will reserve judgment until I know the adequate truth. I will use no propaganda words and no intemperate phrases, because they impair my judgment and interfere with the process of clear thinking. 9. I will permit no man to influence me to hate, fear, or mistrust any man or community of men. If any person manifests hatred, fear, or mistrust, I will treat him as a person mentally or physically ill and will relieve him of all responsibilities until he has recovered his normal state of body and mind. 10. I will have faith that there are powers beyond me that are available for promoting all activities directed toward peace and progress for the web begun God. Sense thread.
All right, well played, Kevin Larson. You know, you send me the document, I read it. I don't know what to do with that. Nobody wants to hear me just read the document. But you send me something spicy like that, where you got nice editing, You got good, clear narration, professional narrator. Good job for stepping up. You are now a media producer, and we look forward to your next presentation, dude. Although he's probably sleeping because I texted. I said, "Do you want me to say your name?" But his name's at the end, so I just read it. It said Kevin Larson, edited by. What do you think, LD? Taking that in for the first time?
Yeah, no, that was fantastic, very powerful. And the imagery and the scrolling text was well done from a production standpoint.
Yeah, and I can't say I agree with everything in it, but I agree with like the spirit in which it was offered.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
This is the time in 1950s. He's like talking like Truman's on vacation, you know? It was a different time back then.
You know, I like the fact that he highlighted, you know, some of the universals that afflict man's soul or men's souls, speaking collectively. And so to me, he was able to find a theme that resonates, I think, you know, regardless of one's time and place. And so I think that, and it's a very powerful message. And I agree with you. I don't agree with every single aspect of it, but the general theme, the spirit in which it was made, as you pointed out, was well stated and certainly hit an emotional aspect of my own soul, especially resonating with the issue of men struggling to find meaning, men struggling to understand their world, and some of the maladies, the debilities, the psychoses that man develops as an affliction of man's soul.
Very similar to what Dostoevsky was writing about.
That's right. And it's similar to what
suffering, like legitimate suffering, brings meaning to life if you do it the right way. If you're pursuing your goals and trying to be a good person, those trials and tribulations bring the balance and meaning that people are missing. So by the time you get to 1950s, you not only have what Dostoevsky was describing, but you compound that with the 1934 Carnegie Foundation removing all these critical thinking, balancing aspects from education.
Correct.
And 20 years later, in the 50s, that guy's observing that about our society.
That's exactly right. And I just have to bring up, you know, we could talk about Seneca Cicero in this capacity, certainly Marcus Aurelius, but I actually want to bring up Aristotle. Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics that he wrote for his son, Nicomachus, he had one of his themes was this idea of the magnanimous man, and the idea of virtue associated with magnanimous man. And what the sub-theme running throughout this entire it's not a dialogue, but this sort of idea that he was trying to build out was that man's form, the manifestation of happiness in man happens from him attempting to achieve goals in life. That there's going to be many trials and many tribulations, but without attempting to take on the unknown, there's no meaning, there's no purpose, and man ends up engaging in self-destruction. In other words, it seems as though the happiest man that he could observe, Aristotle in this case, was the one that was willing to take a risk and try to achieve his goals. And that came with a lot of suffering, that came with a lot of hardship, but it also came with a lot of meaning. And it seemed like the man who was, even for the men who failed, there seemed to have been an idea or an understanding that at least they tried, at least they put their foot forward and gave it their all, especially at least if they gave it their all. And for those that succeeded, they seemed to have what's the word? Almost the engendering of or manifestation of wisdom, understanding that the journey is what gives them a sense of completion, a sense of happiness, a sense of unity within their own disharmony of the soul, at least when they started out before they took that journey.
Well, the journey is the knowledge put into action, and that's how you get to the wisdom part. And you talked about the necessity of taking risk. That's the entrepreneur part. But you're not going to want to take risk unless you're educated and have a good sense of what's the game and what's the next play and where you might be able to add value, right?
That's right.
So LD, real quick, what was the title of the video we're commenting on? Because I have a feeling this will end up as a clip someplace. So what was the video we just watched?
Yeah, The Greatest Danger to the World, a short film. And I've been sharing out the link on the various stream platforms.
And it's on Rumble.
It's on Rumble, yes.
That's where people can find it. Well, I wanted to bring you guys an artifact that plays into what we were just listening to for 20 minutes, because it does talk about the Deweys. They were specifically mentioned in that video, right? Right after he talked about Truman going on vacation.
Oh, sure.
Let me see if I can get this.
Yeah, Dewey Kilpatrick, Experimental Philosophy. That's pragmatism, by the way, for those who are interested. In a great book, which Rich will show you after this book, if he has it, is Politics in Progress. It's a short book, but it's a very dense book in which that book outlines the sort of the political pragmatism that was able to implement the outcome-based educational model that then became, unfortunately, the model for our progressive education in the early 20th century. And so that book goes heavily into the confluence between Dewey and the early pragmatists. William James is in there as well, and many others, and the origins of progressive education in America. It's good. You're good.
No, I lost it though. I got to read.
Oh, you got to read.
Camera.
Sure. Yeah.
I have it on USB still. Oh no, that's the wrong layer. You guys are learning how to run a show right now. There you go. Deactivate, activate, boom. It should work again. Please activate.
And magic. And no.
And no. Let's try again. We were just about to get to the juicy part. Whoever's editing this clip, you're gonna have to edit this part out. This is where things went awry. I might have to
about increasing. Sorry.
Go ahead. Increase complexity.
No, it's about increasing the space between stimulus and response. It's the only way we're able to do this show. It's a nice, relaxed environment. You get to see high production value, not always fully prepared, because we like to introduce a lot of unknowns. Because we like the challenge. It's like a high level athlete. Wink.
No, the USB quit.
Oh, shit.
All right, so I'll fix that. You guys have, how do they say? It's a suspense. You get this. Whoa, geez, all my USBs went crazy. Let's do this. While I fix all these technicals and prepare to show you this book, we'll do them all again, and we're going to go to a next video that we have. Let's do the Del Bigtree announcement of the vCore software, and then his analysis with his lawyer. And then I should be able to get these switches and knobs fixed by the time we come back. And I'll tell you about how they changed education in the 30s and brought in this not so critical thinking, which allowed people by the 50s to get really whacked out, according to investigative journalist John O'Neill, the same one from 9/11.
Not the same
common
one.
Name.
This was 1951 when he wrote that.
Right. But you'll see 70 years later, what we got today is a special brand of crazy, and it does have a lot of history to it. So while we're digging into that, let's go to this clip from the highwire.com, Del Bigtree and Aaron Siri in a
Aaron
series
Siri of ICANN, right?
Okay.
Oh, if you needed LD, I think. Okay, yeah, sorry, you got it.
Hello, everyone. Del Bigtree here from the Highwire. We have breaking news. Our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network, has just received the vSafe data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is the app that was provided to those people who received the COVID-19 vaccine so that they could accurately track any adverse events that happened because of the vaccine. The CDC has been withholding this information
And we're just getting some buffering
from the public, and that's why our nonprofit, ICANN, sued and won. And now they've provided us with over 144 million lines of health data, a huge, gigantic file that we've assembled and put on our website. So all you have to do is go to icandecide.org/vsafe and check it out today. Take a look at how this works. We now know on our dashboard that there was 10,094,310 people that participated in the vSafe app. Of those, 3,353,109 reported some form of an adverse reaction. That number seems huge to me, but that's just my opinion. This is not about opinion. This is the actual raw data from the CDC collated together with this amazing dashboard built by ICANN. The CDC had billions of dollars to build something like this. They didn't do it, so we did it for them. There's all sorts of ways that you can search this. And just look at all the results for Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, those that reported on the Pfizer vaccine. Perhaps you want to just look at the women in the study that were affected, and we click here. Maybe you just want to see the exact symptoms that the app was collecting. You can go to here, symptoms, and start looking through all the different symptoms that were collected in this incredible data set. You will only find it at icandecide.org/vsafe. Whether you're a scientist, a doctor, or just someone that's curious what's happening to the people around you, sign up so you can utilize one of the greatest scientific tools that has ever been built. I have to say I'm really giddy this week. You know, we win a lot of lawsuits. I am lucky that I feel like I've got like this 100-foot-tall bodyguard with me named Aaron Siri. I get to charge into a battle. I say, you know what? Get in there. I want the information from the CDC. I think they're lying to me. I get to pick a fight with the CDC. I get to pick a fight with the FDA. I get to pick fights with the NIH. And then I send in Aaron Siri to go get him and come back with the information. And if you've been watching this show, you know how successful he has been, which means that's how successful we have been. And for all of you that sponsor and donate to us, what you are about to see is a story that you should be thanked for, because without you supporting us, none of this is possible. I'm talking about the vSafe data, the system built by the CDC to track the COVID injuries. We sued because they weren't being transparent about it. This is Aaron Siri on Fox News talking about it.
Civil rights attorney Aaron Siri, the managing partner at Siri and Glimstad. It was 463 days, you tell us, from the time that you requested this vSafe data. Why did it take so long in your estimation, sir?
It's a very good question. Why did it take numerous legal demands, multiple appeals, 2 lawsuits, in fact, before the CDC finally handed over the vSafe data? Maybe the answer is that now that we have that data and we've looked at that data, of the 10 million users within vSafe, 7.7% of them had to seek medical care after vaccination. That is an incredibly high percentage.
Another 2.5 million, we're talking 25%, missed work or school or had bad reactions to the vaccine. What's the takeaway for you from this? Is it significant?
It seems incredibly significant. A big reason that they pushed the COVID vaccine is they said it'll prevent them from having symptoms, being hospitalized, missing work. Now that we have the data, we can see that getting the vaccine caused 25% of people who got the shot within this data set of 10 million people to miss work, to have some serious event.
There's some concern when you have 4 million people reporting joint pain after they got the vaccine.
It's 4 million out of a group of only 10 million people. So that makes that number extremely high. Joint pain is an immune reaction. That is something to be concerned about after vaccination. And all of the data has been put up by our client, who we represented in this case, icandecide.org. And on their website, they've created this amazing, easy-to-use, simple interface where you can search all this data.
Well, it's amazing when we make the news for what we're doing, because the news does not like talking about what we're doing here at the Highwire and the Informed Consent Action Network, which is the nonprofit that makes this show possible. But we did win this vSafe data, and it is my honor and pleasure to speak to the incredible warrior that we have on our side that made all that possible, Aaron Siri. Aaron, first of all, congratulations. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Del.
Yeah.
And thank you, ICANN, for making this work possible. Yeah. Wouldn't be possible without you guys.
Yeah. So a good question is asked in that news report. You know, before we get into the details, you listed some of the details, some very shocking numbers there. And by the way, just so you know, when we put this dashboard up, that icandecide.org/vsafe, which is, you know, where people can find it. We have had, I think it's 3 so far in just the last few days it's been up since, what was it, like Monday, Tuesday we put it up? Monday, 300 times, 300-fold the amount of visitors we usually get to the website. So it just shows you what an incredible thing this is. But the process. I mean, you and I talked about this, I feel like over a year ago. Like, we need to see that data. CDC said it was going to be transparent. We were basically turning the population of America where we live into a giant clinical trial, right? Skipping out of the studies because of the emergency use authorization. And CDC promised us, we know this is dangerous. We know this is dangerous, but trust us, we've built a surveillance system on top of our VAERS system, and we'll be able to track and let you know how everything's going. So, you know, were they transparent? What did you think they should have done with this vSafe data? Let's start there. What should they have done based on what they told us?
They should have released it to the public immediately.
Yeah.
Most of the vSafe data is simply check the box. It doesn't contain any personally identifiable information. It's something the CDC could have provided to the public right away. And now we know, now that we have it, that by May of 2021, most of the vSafe data that we now have received, and they could have provided it within minutes. They sent us a few Excel files. Right. They could have produced that in literally a matter of minutes, provided transparency to the American public. As in that segment you just showed from Fox News, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I know we're going to go through a lot of stuff today, but I'll just say that those figures were available all the way back in May. Why weren't they made public? Why weren't they a part of the conversation before, let's say in June, they then said, let's give this shot to babies?
Man. And why were we, and we're going to get into the details, why were we being told a totally different story than what they were actually seeing with their own eyes in their own system? But before we get to what we discovered, I just want to talk about the journey, because sometimes the journey is more telling than the information that you actually get. Yeah. You know, we always start these things out, you know, we don't have to be litigious. One of the things that your law firm is doing for us is filing Freedom of Information Act requests. For people that are brand new to this, that essentially is the government works for us. In the United States of America, they're our employees, which means just like I can check my employees here, I can check their emails, everyone that's, you know, using our email system, I want to know what my employees are saying. I don't do that, by the way, but I could. We get to do that with our public officials because they work for us, and so we make demands. We would like to see, you know, for instance, we talked about the Peter Daszak or the autopsies. We put in these requests. We want to see how many autopsies you've looked at from the VAERS system. And then they push back, and when they push back, we end up filing a lawsuit. In this case, what was our original Freedom of Information Act request when it came to vSafe?
Yeah, the request was filed in June 24th, 2021. So quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And the initial request we filed was for all the de-identified information in the vSafe system.
Okay.
Okay. The reason that we asked for that was twofold. First, as you just mentioned, we are a repeat player with these federal health agencies.
Yes, they know who we are.
We have hundreds of FOIA requests before the FDA, the NIH, the CDC, HRSA, go down the AHRQ, there's about over 20 actual health agencies within the HHS.
Right.
And so when we've done FOIAs in the past and we've asked for medical information, what will typically happen is they'll tell us, oh wait, we can't give you that because it includes personally identifiable information about people in the public, so you can't have it. And then we go through this long rigmarole where we say, okay, just please redact it and then provide it. And then eventually we end up getting the data. For that reason, and this one other reason I'm about to say, we asked for the de-identified data, and the other reason is, before we file a FOIA request, we do some homework.
Okay.
And when we did that homework, what we found is that in the CDC's official vSafe guidance documents, it actually says that de-identified data was available to Oracle, which was housing the data.
So they're the ones that are like sort of housing all the data. They don't want them to have that information because that's a private company, correct?
Oracle's a private company.
Okay.
And so they're not allowed to share that kind of information. So it says it right there.
Right.
The CDC's own material. It's de-identified. So we thought, great, this is the perfect request.
Yeah.
We're asking for something that apparently in their own literature they're saying exists in the hands of another private entity already. Should be easy, just hand it over to us.
Right.
So we filed a FOIA request, as I mentioned, on June 24th in 2021. we eventually they respond. And the response is that they're not able to locate any data.
They can't locate any data.
De-identify data.
Wow.
So we appeal that on August 25th.
Okay.
And, we say, well, your own literature says you gave de-identified data to Oracle.
Right.
So, one, we were trying to shortchange this whole process, guys.
Right.
Come on, we know how this goes. And two, we know you have it already, so just give it.
Right.
So in addition to filing the appeal, a few days later, on September 1, we also submitted a second FOIA request.
Okay.
This time, the FOIA request made explicit we'd like all de-identified data that you gave to Oracle, basically. Right. I'm paraphrasing it.
Yeah.
I hear,
they're getting the details. We got that happening there.
I saw that on the screen. So there it is.
Yeah.
That's basically what it asked for.
Okay.
Now,
because there's been a lot of questions why 2 FOIAs and ultimately 2 lawsuits. So that's why 2 FOIAs. We thought they're pushing back in a weird way, so let's be very specific.
There's a third FOIA, actually.
Okay.
Well, that was there. Those. So then we said, okay, now they'll capitulate.
Right.
I wish the story ended there. It does. It rarely does. That's the second FOIA.
Right.
Okay. And then, so we thought, okay, now they'll capitulate and give us the data. No, they still maintain that they can't give us the data. So they really left us with no choice. So we sued in federal court on those 2 requests, as well as the third one that we won't talk, that's not as relevant.
Yeah.
Okay? And the first lawsuit was filed on December 28, 2021. I see it on the screen right
here. There we are, yep.
You can see Informed Consent Action Network versus the CDC.
And by the way, everyone out there that's donating to us, I want you to see in many ways your name is in there. Your name is a part of the Informed Consent Action Network, because that's not anything except those people that support us, giving us the ability to fund the work that you're doing. And it's not easy. It's not a one shop and all of a sudden they hand it to us. Look at how much time you're putting in with your team to try and get this out. So, okay, you filed that case.
Yeah, if we could pull that complaint back up for a moment, it might be worth just taking a look at just there's a few paragraphs, I believe, that were highlighted. You asked me to tell the story.
Yeah, I did. Let's
put it
see
together.
Okay, great.
And it's
here it is.
It says the federal government has mandated that millions of Americans receive these vaccines, and this is what we're writing to the court.
Yeah.
Lawsuit. These vaccine products. HHS has also been given pharmaceutical companies complete immunity for injuries caused by those products, mandating that millions of Americans inject a product for which they cannot hold the manufacturer liable if the product injures them, demands complete transparency, especially when it comes to releasing the data underlying the product safety. FOIA exists precisely so that the American people can obtain transparency, and in this case, obtain the data which supports the CDC's claims to intensive safety monitoring.
Right.
And then it goes on to explain in this paragraph what VSafe, the smartphone app, is, and we can go.
I'll read it. VSafe is a smartphone app that allows vaccine recipients to tell CDC about any side effects after getting the COVID-19 vaccine. The purpose of the app is to rapidly characterize the safety profile of COVID-19 vaccines when given outside a clinical trial setting, and to detect and evaluate clinically important adverse events and safety issues that might impact policy or regulatory decisions.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it goes on, and I think this might be the last.
Okay, let's see it. Go ahead. You take it.
Data submitted to VSafe is, quote, collected, managed, and housed in a secure server by Oracle, end quote. That is a quote from the CDC's own document.
All right, so you're
quoting.
That's why you got the little number in there, 7.
The footnote 7. A private computer technology company. Although the CDC has, quote, access to the individual survey data, quote, Oracle can only access, quote, aggregate, de-identified data for reporting, end quote.
But there's more. Let me read this. Despite the fact that the de-identified data already exists, it is already in the hands of a private company, and the CDC has never objected to its production. The CDC has so far failed to produce it to plaintiff or to the American public. The federal government is thereby not only failing to provide the transparency necessary to earn the American people's trust regarding these vaccines, but it is also failing to comply with FOIA.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent.
So we filed this lawsuit, and we thought, okay, now we don't have to deal with the folks in the CDC. Now we get to deal with the CDC's attorneys.
Right.
Little law firm. They're called the Department of Justice.
Right.
Never heard of them. They have all our money.
Right.
So, so we figured better we can maybe deal directly with the Department of Justice in this one. So we sued them in federal court with that suit. And we started that dialogue with the Department of Justice. And it often happens, they reach out and so forth. After months of back and forth with the Department of Justice, and they filed an answer, we had status conferences, and so forth, the DOJ maintained the position that since the de-identified data doesn't actually already exist, they said that the CDC apparently got it wrong when they wrote what they wrote in their own document.
Really? So that was the argument, that it didn't go to Oracle de-identified.
They said that it's not, that what you just read in black and white in that quote is not actually what happened in reality. So after months
I mean, hold on a second, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I was just thinking, like, I think like a movie. I used to sort of, you know, right, I was in Hollywood. So these lawyers all sit down. You got the CDC, your client sitting there. Like, we got a little problem here. We need to come up with the best argument we can. First of all, the fact that they're trying to keep us from getting to it is just, as I said, sometimes the process tells you more than what you actually see. What are they trying to hide from us? Why is this so important? But the best argument they come up with is either we were misinformed or we just lied about our process.
Well, it was kind of, it's kind of like na for two reasons.
Okay.
One, it requires the government to reasonably interpret a request for information. The request, as reasonably interpreted, when we asked for de-identified data, it meant if it exists or ones that you could make from the data, right?
Right.
It didn't even dawn on me, frankly, when we filed this request, that they would take this position, which they'd never done before.
Wow.
That, sorry, if you had to ask for all the data, right, then we could have made de-identified data, which is always what happened in the past. But since we asked for it in the first instance, they're taking the position, it doesn't already exist that way, so you can't have it.
So you were too specific.
Too specific. I was trying to be too accommodating.
Right, right.
And obviously, I did it with the knowledge that we had this Oracle admission in their papers, which they then kind of disavowed. All right.
Okay.
So that goes on. From December, when we filed the suit, up until April, where we're finally like, okay. And I remember the call with the Department of Justice. I literally remember telling the Department of Justice attorney, I said, look, if what you're saying is you're just going to maintain this super technical position, then
Sorry, folks. This is the Highwire
Yeah,
website.
it's because Dell got banned from YouTube and the rest of the internet, and so now he has to host his own videos over there, and his server gets whacked with people like us trying to like show it to us now. We'll check to see if he has also like a backup stream on Odyssey, these things, because it does happen occasionally when we play clips from his site that it hangs up a little bit. It seems like that clip, especially, he's getting a lot of activity this weekend. That's a good thing to see, that he's getting a lot of traffic. You guys can go over to the highwire.com, see his full conversation with Aaron Siri and all the things going on with that FOIA, the response to the too technical ask, and then they re-asked it so they could actually get a data response on the vSafe, which is the CDC software they use to track everybody for the patent offering through peer pressure and extortion and things like that. All right, looks like we got Tony back up and running.
I got the 920 working, but just to comment quickly on the clip, I was trying to play the clip here where we have good internet, and unfortunately, it's not really working. So the stream, it sometimes gets saturated over at the Highwire. So it happens. I know when I do the show card, there are times in which I do struggle to get the videos to play, but for the most part, they do a great job. And that just probably means there's just a hopefully there's a lot of people consuming that information, and it's not some other issue with their servers or their connection in some capacity. So, but very interesting to see the vSafe data, the fact that it's anonymous and it records. I didn't get a chance to listen to a ton of the video because I'm working with cameras in the background, but I know there's an issue between vaccine injury and what's the other terminology they were using? Side effects. And so there's another term they use that has to do with like, did you experience, and they're very specific terminology, adverse events. I think that's the term, adverse events, and then side effects. So for example, you can have multiple adverse events for one injection. So you can have soreness at the arm, you can have a migraine, you can have a blood clot. All three would be 3 adverse events, one individual, which is why you can have such a high number in the adverse events. Now, what becomes I think if I remember the definition, it has to do with somehow a direct causal link to the vaccine directly as being the reason for malady or debility manifesting, whereas whereas an adverse event could be or could not be related to vaccines. It just happened to be contemporaneous with the injection. So it's a correlation causation issue. At least that's the way they get around these definitions. So adverse events are a little bit more loose in definition. Side effects are more specific. But the fact that the human body is so complex and the fact they're so heavily correlated with getting the injection, if I remember correctly. So when someone gets the injection, they experience all these adverse effects around the same time they got the injection. It's reasonable to assume, at least to induce, that there's a high probability that there's some causal relationship. Exactly.
And
that's
you can't
exactly
study
right.
if they're hiding the data.
And why would they hide the data if it's anonymous?
Because they don't want you to study it, apparently, because that's the thing that everyone needed to do for their own informed consent and safety, and it wasn't being done.
And that's the CDC.
So we can look at the data now that the data is up on the I Can Decide website.
Yeah, what's it look like, Justin?
And sure enough, when you look at the number of users registered, all right, check-ins by survey interval and doses. So the most common by far time to report an adverse reaction comes on day 1 to 6.
Right there. That's exactly. Thank you, Just. That's perfect.
There's a big spike right there.
And it's contemporaneous because it's happening around the same time. So what they try to do is argue false cause fallacy, which is not true. Like when you have a preponderance of evidence for an event occurring around the same time, something else changes in your body. That pattern should then be investigated. Instead, they try to say, no, it's probably unrelated. They try to brush it off and act as though it's nothing. And this is a government organization. This is not Pfizer.
Was you weren't vaccinated until 14 days after you got jabbed, and there's a lot of things that happen in those 14 days that were also not being considered and weighed in the people's decision making.
That's well said.
It might have been on purpose as well.
Hey, Justin, go back to that screen real quick if you can. Or you were still on it.
Yeah,
looking at another interesting.
It looks
thing
like that's in with it. Now, is this days from vaccination or days from being considered vaccinated?
This
like
is
the
actually
injection date. If it's 6 days after injection, that's outside of the realm that they were considering being vaccinated. So they
if you had a severe reaction, in that 1 in 6 days, they weren't counting that as part of the data, at least in VAERS, if I remember correctly. And I don't know how Pfizer recorded, but in VAERS, they didn't count that first 1 to 6 days. So VAERS is, to the point that we've brought up for many times on the show, is severely underreported, and that we really are piggybacking on Del Bigtree and Aaron Series' work in regards to releasing that information through their FOIA requests and their lawsuits to the FDA, the NIH and NIAID and so forth and so on, CDC. Well, when did the spike? So like when you see those graphs, LD, can you sticky that? I don't know if you can sticky that or pin that, or bring it up on your end. But what months are those? Is it labeled by month there, or is it just numbers there?
Yeah, symptoms by year and month, and most of them are within the first 5 months, which really correlates with most of the users signing up in the first 5 months. And then it looks like after June of 21, it's been minimal compared to the activity or what was given by the CDC.
Or they whitewash the data a little bit because that's right when the vaccine program started.
I'm not claiming it, but it looks a little strange that,
Sure.
Yeah, we would like smarter people.
It only happened for the first 5 months they came out.
Sure.
Now that it's been unhidden and visualized, looks concerning. Smart people want to know what's going on with this. And Yeah. Did you have any other chance to do searches in there, Justin?
Of symptoms and severity, the top 4 being pain, fatigue, headache, muscle or body aches, and joint pains, making up 3/4 of all of the reported events. And I mean, what a trifecta. Pain, fatigue, headache, like that's 3 ailments that most people are hard pressed to stay productive and joyous and great with life.
What's strange here, if you look at symptoms, look how general these are: pain, fatigue, headache, muscle or body aches. I assume I can't read the rest of that. Joint pain, swelling, chills, nausea, redness, itching, diarrhea, and abdominal pain.
You know what's missing from the list?
Rash and outside vomiting, irritability, sleeplessness, loss of appetite, and groin under. I can't read that. Some issue with the groin. That's
groin,
okay.
underarm swelling.
You know what's missing from the list?
Okay.
Getting COVID 1, 2, 3, 4 times after having that.
What about blood clots? What about any sort of neurological conditions?
Myocarditis on the list? What is that?
It's not to be found.
Did they not want to measure it, or is there no cases of it? Did they ask
not
to be
explicitly pointed to?
Oh, okay. So maybe if they just leave that off the list, it doesn't show up. That's interesting too.
How convenient. We call that a neglected aspect fallacy for anyone who's playing along.
No, I could be wrong because I haven't studied it that much. So
that's all it's showing here. And here we have what J&J, Moderna, obviously Moderna and Pfizer. Moderna's purple. It looks like their Pfizer's yellow.
Making up the majority in total with J&J and otherwise seemingly not having the events.
Oh, good point. And we know
it looks
there's
about like that donut graph on the right looks about like your odds when you spin roulette at the casino. It's going to come black, red, or neutral.
Unfortunately, it's not the casino. It's actually a Russian roulette situation. It's like what's that scene in The Deer Hunter? Very intense scene. If you remember that.
Mow. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, kind of like that. That's a metaphor.
There's actually 2 scenes in that movie. I think that it happens, and then they have to go back and get Willem Dafoe.
Yes,
who it was?
I think so, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
1977. It's a good callback. That's outside. That's before you were born, Tony. That's a pretty good callback for you.
Thank you.
All right, so I did find the book. I got the book cam. This ties to the thing you heard a half hour ago now. So you got to have that. What do they call it? Attention span? It's not right next to the thing. We're going to circle back to it. We're going to Jen Psaki back to this book because in relation to the video we watched, what was the title, LD?
The Greatest Danger to the World, a short film.
Greatest Danger to the World. It's posted over on Rumble. I thought of this book, which we covered a couple weeks ago, but I'll bring it back up because none dare call it treason. Even 25, 50 years later, is still a big deal. It's 50 plus years, actually. This comes from page 101, and this actually is episode 101 of this podcast. That's pretty cool. Synchronicity right there. Chapter 6. Roman numeral trick right there. All right, education. Here's a quote. And the quote comes from Admiral Hyman Rickover. You'll learn who he is in a second. America is reaping the consequences of the destruction of traditional education by the Dewey Kilpatrick experimentalist philosophy. Dewey's ideas had led to the elimination of many academic subjects on the ground that they would not be useful in life. The student thus receives neither intellectual training nor the factual knowledge which will help him understand the world he lives in, or to make the well-reasoned decisions in his private life or as a responsible citizen. Admiral Hyman Rickover. Who was this man? Dewey, who is so roundly criticized by the renowned Hyman Rickover, the father of the nuclear submarine. That's a submarine that doesn't have to come to the surface very often to get refueled. It's a big deal back in the day. John Dewey was an educational philosopher. So I know we read this into the record in its entirety, but it's pointing out the changes in education that led to those ideas in the 50s and those very challenging ideas in the 50s, and also what has led us up to the Great Reset, a planned, coordinated, socialized economy. These ideas have been long in the making, but here's kind of the money shot, page 103. Financed by the Carnegie Corporation, the Counts-directed study was to serve as the authoritative guide for revamping the philosophy and concept of American education. The final volume, issued in 1934, this is what Charlotte Iserbyt called the Blue Book, the Carnegie Blue Book, contained the recommendations of the 5-year project of the Carnegie Corporation, of which the following is typical. Quote, cumulative evidence supports the conclusion that in the United States and in other countries, the age of individualism and laissez-faire, freedom and liberty, in economy and government is closing, and a new age of collectivism is emerging. That's interesting. What do you think about that, Tony? Collectivism.
Me on the spot, don't make it. I was playing with cameras.
No, I want to look up the footnote. Footnote 11. I want to see what chapter. There's chapter 6. I wanted to see what the source of that is. Doing it live for the audience.
What's the quote again, real quick? I'm sorry.
I got it.
Yeah.
Chapter 7, chapter 6, footnote 11, Ibid, which means it's the one above that, right? So if Ibid,
that's right.
On page, wait, I might not be on the right page. This is page 103, and it was footnote 11, and this is chapter 6. Chapter 6, footnote 11. Okay, so Ibid, and it's on page 137 of the report, Special House Committee to Investigate Tax-Exempt Foundations, 83rd Congress, 1954, pages 137, 153, 137 are these footnotes. Do you know what that is? That's the Reese Committee report. We talk about that all the time.
Oh yeah, how many times have we both shown that book on this show?
All right, so now he's talking some sense. He's read a document that we've discussed many times on the show. Now let's see what we can put together beyond that. In the paragraphs previous and the paragraphs following, they talk about British socialism. You know, back in that dystopic 1984 book, there was this thing called INGSOC, INGSOC. But the ING was really for English, and the SOC was really for socialism. And it reflected very much the view of the British Fabian socialist society.
I was going to say it's a metaphor for Fabian socialism. That's exactly right.
Oddly enough, in this chapter that talks about the downfall of education in America and how it was really created into schooling, so everyone would think the same. In between that and this idea of the Great Reset, world socialism, collectivism, we got this page over here. And it does mention the Fabian socialists right here. Dewey was a socialist. Let me get on the screen. At the climax of his career in 1950, he became honorary national chairman of the American counterpart of the British Fabian Society, the League for Industrial Democracy. Well, that's interesting because that's like the Fabian socialists making their way into America. Now, we should check the references on that. As all things that we read, we shouldn't just take it as
it's like Chatham House and then the UN at Rockefeller.
But there is a serious infrastructure there to be studied. And what he's describing is an overlap between these groups. Now, over here, you've got the ideas that lead to common core. Oh, it's kind of like survival today, not survival tomorrow. That makes you dependent on centralized authority, for which Dewey was a front man, right? Dewey laid the foundation for the future, quote, destruction of traditional education, end quote, decried by Admiral Rickover when he said, Dewey's words, we violate the child's nature and render difficult the best ethical results by introducing the child too abruptly to a number of special studies, reading, writing, geography, etc., out of relation to his social life. The true center of correlation of the school subjects is not science, nor literature, nor history, nor geography, but the child's own social activities. Now, these are social activities around people you would not voluntarily associate, and you're kind of in a structured situation where it is very hard to maintain your attention and actually do learning, because learning is a non-linear process. They try to make it very much a linear process in the Prussian education system. But continuing on, strict acceptance of Dewey's theories would eliminate teaching world geography unless the child can take a trip around the world. History would be eliminated from the curriculum because it is past and it will not be relived by the student. In practice, Dewey's theories, as modified by his disciples, have eliminated the teaching of strict rules of grammar. The student learns grammar by, quote, living, talking with the group or reading literature. Old-fashioned drill and spelling of the ABCs, penmanship, multiplication tables, and other basics have been de-emphasized in favor of learn by doing. Depending on the degree to which the progressive education methods are carried out, learn by doing can mean learn not at all. He continues on. Promotions become automatic. Nobody's left behind because of poor work. There's a question. Rosalie Gordon, the author, the widely circulated What's Happened in Our Schools. Let me get it back on the screen. The progressive system has reached all the way down to the lowest grades to prepare the children of America for their role as collectivists of the future. This is very much like what they need for the Great Reset. This is the infrastructure. This is the foundational laying of it. Generations ago, the group, not the individual child, is the quintessence of progressivism. There we go. The child must always be made to feel part of the group. He must indulge in group thinking and in group activity.
That's called the pro-paidetic function.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but that's Alexander Inglis's 13 or 14 principles of education, and that was the Harvard speech he gave in the early 20th century that took Gatto quite a few hoops through which he had to jump in order to obtain that documented history, including him having to call the Harvard's record office and having them inquire as to why would you want such a speech. And anyways, go for it. I'm sorry.
Now, little moving a little bit forward to achieve this new social order, 1932. Now, this is before the Carnegie Report was out. This is while they're reading it, right? The guy Counts, who was in charge. 1932 called for teachers of the nation to provide the impetus. In his monograph, Dare the School to Build a New Social Order? Counts notes that the teachers should deliberately reach for power and then make the most of their conquest is my firm conviction. To the extent that they are permitted to fashion the curriculum and procedures of the school, they will definitely and positively influence the social attitudes, ideas, and behaviors of the coming generation. Now, I remember Charlotte Iserby, before her passing, she always said that the findings of the Reese Committee reflected the Carnegie Foundation nationalist agendas, and specifically, it was described that they wanted to change the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of Americans to be in line with collectivism so they can have like a world communist state. Now, it sounded crazy a long time ago when she said it. And it sounded crazy when Yuri Bezmenov said it.
Yeah, it was 1980s when they both said the same thing. It was the 1980s. That's right.
But now Klaus talks Great Reset, and that's what the branding for this thing is. It's clearly described over decades and decades, and they just rebranded it. So
we're talking a little over their actual sort of business plans, if you will. Is that the best way to describe it?
Kind of like that. And they're reaching for power. That kind of like that's what they did during COVID. Because here's an example. A dying laissez-faire must be completely destroyed, and all of us, including the owners, must be subjugated to a large degree of social control.
Like stakeholder
new credit system? Yeah, right.
Stakeholder capitalism, or, it's a foreshadowing philosophically of postmodernism. When they talk about power should be the thing that takes precedent over all other considerations, abstractions, or concepts. That's a postmodern idea. So they're foreshadowing the rise of postmodernism in the university systems as well.
We're commenting on a video made from an article written in 1951. This book was written in 1964, 65, somewhere in there. So this is like a decade after. It's describing the same problem, but it's progressed. The new public mind. So this is in his book, The Great Technology. This is written for teachers in 1933. This is Rugg. This is for all the teachers who are being trained with this information. Quote, a new public mind is to be created. How? Only by creating tens of millions of new individual minds and welding them together into a new social mind. Old stereotypes must be broken up, and new climates of opinion formed in the neighborhoods of America. Have they been doing that recently? Is that like what cancel culture does? It forces this type of thing into our culture. Right. That's interesting.
Absolutely. It's the molding of the individual.
Clearly, Rugg was proposing the destruction of the small businessman and complete government control of every citizen's life and employment. Sound like something that's happened in the past couple of years? Later in this book, he defined how schools were to be used to transform American political and economic institutions and create the new public mind, which would accept complete government control of the individual. Common Core, anybody? Here's a quote. Through the schools of the world, we shall disseminate a new conception of government, one that will embrace all of the collective activities of men, one that will postulate the need for scientific control and operation of economic activities in the interest of all people. The Great Reset. You will eat the bugs.
That's interesting. That reminds me a little bit of the Hegelian dialectic we observed last week when one of the books you showed last week in regards to the material dialectic of Marx and Engels. In regards to, again, we're circling back to this idea of utopia. They seem to be able to move the world, as I think Quigley pointed out in his Evolution of Civilizations, to their own new form or idea of civilization, one that doesn't go through the vicissitudes, the high points and low points of a culture or civilization, one that doesn't go anywhere, in fact, one that embodies a utopia. Go ahead.
Yeah, someplace that's not here. And it's artificially created.
Nowhere.
It's contradictory.
That's what it means. Nowhere.
Nowhere. Note that
no
Rugg,
place. Sorry, go ahead.
Note that Rugg did not say a new type of government, but a new conception of government. One that might have public partnerships and stakeholder capitalism, maybe. Rugg proposed that this could be accomplished in three ways. First and foremost, the development of a new philosophy of life and education, which will be fully appropriate to the new social order. It's like the green agenda right there. Second, the building of an adequate plan for the production of a new race of educational workers, the Great Reset. Third, the making of new activities and materials for the curriculum. But they have to be carbon net zero friendly and produced by multi-billion-dollar international corporations.
But that's the end game. That's the end game because it is the culture. So first is the culture. So what they're really describing there is the sort of cultural war that's taking place in the universities, the postmodern studies. That's exactly they're what's the word? Sort of as analogically emasculating the entire population, not just men, but and confusing the population, gaslighting the population, creating forms of psychoses that we alluded to earlier.
You can't gaslight a population that can think for itself, has
right.
Individual moxie. So you got to break all that down. And here's how they did it. So this guy Rugg, I'm quoting from him, and you might think, well, no big deal because nobody reads Rugg. Okay, 5 million school children, quote unquote, learned American political and economic history structure in the 1930s from 14 social studies textbooks that Rugg authored. In the image of what the Carnegie Foundation and these other internationalist foundations were telling people like him to author, right? So it's a top-down changing of the education system purposely into some teaching things like class hatred. We're not going to talk about that. That might be too
and gender studies and
crazy
ethnic studies.
Crazy topics out there. UNESCO comes into it right over here. It's only page 110. It's like a 400-page book. So it's pretty juicy. It's 1964. Let's check the title page again. It's like subtract 1965. There you go. 25th anniversary on 1990.
Was it in Roman numerals? I couldn't see that. Oh, sorry.
Page 110. Let's see who the quote originates with. We'll start on page 109 to get to it because it's internationalism. You might have heard of this. Might have been told you're a conspiracy theorist, but you could totally see it going on today at the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset. And this is some roots of that because this is 5 years before the Club of Rome's Predicament of Mankind paper, which has on its last page or one of the last pages, the call for a world forum the next year. And the next year is Klaus, 1971. He's like, let's create this Davos World Economic Forum. In 1973, they have a manifesto. Prince Bernhard, the SS officer from the Netherlands, Aurelio Pache from the Club of Rome, who wrote the paper, Predicament of Mankind, that called for so the whole thing is well documented. This is a little bit before that. We're going to go to the section called Internationalism, page 109. Since World War II, propaganda for world government under the United Nations has been added to textbook agitation for the collectivist society envisioned by Counts and Rugg. So those two authors have been pushing a world internationalism type of collectivist government, and they're getting better at it because it's now being adopted as the Great Reset. That's a new form of government. It's not the reinvention of government. It's a new flavor of government. It's collectivism. It's fascism, public-private partnerships, basically what it is, with flavors of communism and socialism. It's like the Neapolitan ice cream of political theories. Let's say it like that. The drive, spearheaded in America by the National Education Association, is part of a worldwide movement by UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It received the official blessing of President Truman's Commission on Higher Education. Well, we heard about Truman in that video. The commission's report, issued in 1947, had these recommendations. The following. The role which education will play officially must be conditioned essentially by policies established in the State Department in this country and by the ministries of foreign affairs in other countries. Well, that's interesting. So our education system becomes schooling. They take free will out of it. They take voluntary association out of it. And now it's been prescribed from on high from Julian Huxley at UNESCO, an international organization under the auspices of the United Nations. And it seems like a good thing. It's probably because they love us, not because they want world government, because that'd be a conspiracy theory. Continuing on page 110. What was the UNESCO program which the Presidential Commission recommended that American schools should implement? Embodied in the 9-volume UNESCO study Towards World Understanding. It is the blueprint for conditioning American children for the day when their first loyalty will be to a socialistic, one world government under the United Nations. Now, do you guys think that Klaus Schwab World Economic Forum is above or below United Nations level of power? I'd say it's a working group kind of below it. And the people who made the UN are these nonprofit foundations that we're talking about, and some other people who are also top down from the World Economic Forum. So I'd say it's still solid to look into this very strongly.
Yeah, I think the thing with the UN is most people are true believers, part of the educational program, in order to instantiate these lofty sort of utopic ideals in the minds of influential and powerful people that sit on at the chairs of the UN, for example.
They need to read some Dostoevsky. Can we get some Dostoevsky movies sent to them or something? All right. Loyalty to the United Nations. That's what they're working for. The work of authors Counts and Rugg laid the foundation for the first two steps, the destruction of the United States Constitution and free economy, so that America could be easily merged into a socialistic world federation. What a wonderful idea, Klaus thought. Now, UNESCO Director General, under whom the plan was prepared, was Julian Huxley, an atheistic philosopher and a member of the Colonial Bureau of the British Fabian Society. I was going to say Eugenics Society, but he was also the head of that. The goal of UNESCO was stated plainly in the study's first volume. It recommended that children should be educated in, quote, those qualities of citizenship which provide the foundation upon which international government must be based if it is to succeed. So they want to take groups of kids, generation by generation, ameliorate them, make them like the United Nations, and think it's cooler than just America and, their national sovereignty.
The point isn't for future education; it's for schooling them in the now, so they don't. Right.
It's like their fourth industrial revolution. Under Huxley, UNESCO envisioned that the destruction of children's love of country and patriotism was the first step towards education of world citizenship. Well, glad that hasn't taken hold anywhere that we live. Let's go to the next page. Let's skip around here a little bit. Thus, UNESCO recommends the deliberate undereducation of children. The student who does not know or understand the accomplishments of America and the shortcomings of the rest of the world are likely to accept a world government. That's sounds like a great idea, right? Dude, you don't even have to think about it. That's basically what they're saying, right? Just world government, United Nations, and you don't have to think about it.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
He's still slow. My apologies.
He is slow all the time. Such deliberate undereducation. Such deliberate undereducation is a theme which runs through the entire UNESCO program. So the underpreparing of people for life. That seems kind and generous, thoughtful. Woo. In the education and training of teachers recommended. Therefore, we regard it as a matter of first importance for social and international living that educators should be more concerned with the child and the healthy development of his body and mind than with the content of the various subjects which go into the school curriculum. Because of failure to adopt a wise approach to the child's growth and development, the primary school still tends to function as if it were an institution for the abolition of literacy. Should the school's primary function be the teaching of reading, writing, and arithmetic, the abolition of illiteracy, or Or the conditioning of the child for social and international living. Well, they think it's for social and international living, which explains why there's a lot of people out there who go through the whole system and don't know how to support themselves yet and are struggling, whereas generations before were able to readily do that and kind of copiously.
When I showcased the military and using the same reading test between World War II and then the Korean War, and there was a precipitous drop in reading comprehension. And so it's not surprising that the ability they could read, but they didn't read with understanding. That's what basically happened. And it's interesting.
Yeah,
There's a big
book talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Gatto's book. Yeah.
And it comes from, I forget the reference that I took it from. It wasn't from Gatto specifically. I actually got it from Gino Denning. It's part of my Trivium Compendium I put together, but you're right. Gatto does mention that the downfall of reading this basic.
They noticed
basic
it was
abilities.
happening so fast over the course just a few decades that it was
That's right.
staggering how little people coming in could actually do basic things.
Right. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Go ahead, sir.
In short, UNESCO recommends that schools be converted into indoctrination centers for the production of emotionally conditioned children who react like Pavlov's dogs rather than reason and think logically. The best-selling book, Rudolf Flesch's Why Johnny Can't Read, exposes the results of such undereducation in one curriculum area. So they go on to talk about this, and the book's got a whole lot of other stuff. But pertaining to that mass formation psychosis that was being described in the 20-minute video that we just checked out, I thought it was relevant to say, look, there's other layers to what's going on. There's root causes that cause those symptoms being noticed. And without us saying, what did they take out to make us into this situation? And maybe if we put it back in, we get our freedom back. That could be like just starting to ask questions and not assume that what they're telling you is true. Maybe reading a good book.
Which is why you had the finger on the pulse of this when it comes to education. That's, when you interviewed John Taylor Gatto, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that production. I was not, I was new to this. I had not come to understand the corruption of the education system and how intertwined it was with corrupt philosophies, with politics, with a supranational sort of ideological idea of collectivism that I didn't quite understand. And it took me many years, and thanks to you, to sort of break that open. And obviously the trailblazers that came before in regards to Charlotte Iserbyt and John Taylor Gatto and many others,
and G. Edward Griffin. Griffin's explanations, when I think back, like Griffin was really the one who broke down. He's like collectivism, individualism, all these other things fall under those two subject headings. Yes. And if you think of things in a freedom or slavery connotation, you can't have your rights oriented and given to you by a group of people just like you, that it breaks down. Society breaks down in that situation. So you need individuals with their rights, and the individuals don't violate their rights. Then they have the means of production and invention and ingenuity and hard work and work ethic. Correct. And they own the means and the labor, the fruits of those labors. Then they can be independent and then interdependent and help each other out. And you can have a nice economy where people follow the rules, and you can have rules set up for people who follow rules. But in society and throughout history, you're always going to have people who don't follow those rules. And you're still going to need to have self-defense against those people. Intellectual self-defense, physical self-defense, and non-aggression have always been the components of what individual freedom and liberty are about.
Sounds like they're trying to break the will of the individual, because you break the will, because it seems like we're problem solvers, we're creative, we're imaginative, and people want to, a form of self-actualization is finding our sort of niche for creativity, our sort of niche for our ability to express ourselves in some way that gives us a sense of meaning, purpose, and identity. And it seems like they put the lid on the jar. Did we play a clip like that last week at all?
Yeah, where they break people's free will, and they've done it in most every other country around the world for several generations. So this is why it's an important thing.
Oh, so you mean it's a multi-generational recognition of the ability to control people, and the ability to control people is the ability to control their mind, or actually it's not even controlling their mind as much as breaking their will. You need to get people to acquiesce
using their minds basically for them to be controlled, though.
Is that like all these other far ideas aside? Yeah, the most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed. Yeah, here it is. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And that is Steve Biko, 1946, 1977.
Hold that up a little longer.
Sure.
He's going to have a document cam in there soon enough, but there you go.
And I'm working on fixing these other cams. I know there's a sync issue with my voice, but I'll get that on the next clip. I do want to get this one last record, or one last artifact on the record. This comes from Dorothy Sayers. Now, she was a crime novelist. She wrote fiction and nonfiction. She was a poet, literary critic, and a classicist. And she gave a speech from an essay she wrote in 1947. She gave it to Oxford University. And it's called The Lost Tools of Learning. Now, all these individuals that Rich is quoting all acknowledged and seemed to understand and make explicit the pattern of what was happening in American culture and American society, particularly in American education. And I thought I would just sort of piggyback on the fact that she also recognized this sort of loss of the individual to express themselves, to learn anything for themselves, give themselves the tools to be able to learn anything and to be self-actualized in the ability to be independent and self-assured. So I just want to read a quick quote from this fantastic essay in regards, and not trying to castigate the trivium or quadrivium or cast aspersions on it, rather, because there's a lot of sort of misunderstandings in regards to what she then promotes as being the best form of education. And we can talk about that separately. I certainly teach the trivium, so I'm biased towards that. But just her recognition of the state of education, and this was in 1947, delivered at Oxford University, of all places. So if we can give me a second here. I had it right here. Where'd it go? Oh, no, I lost it. Here. Here's the quote. Let me see. Do I have it on screen? Everyone see it all right? Okay.
Control plus it a little bit. And what I'm going to say is I just looked up all these resources and we're going to add them to the Freedom Vault. So if you haven't yet gone to grandtheftworld.com and there's a little pop-up that says get my Freedom Vault, we're going to add it to those resources and allow everyone to have a bigger part of what Tony's alluding to right there.
And this is preserved in the Trivium Compendium I just mentioned. It's part of the Trivium course. If you purchase the course I gave for the autonomy class, it's available on the Agora Marketplace. But there's a whole compendium of all I organized all the resources in an interactive document, an interactive PDF with links embedded, so people can explore the steps that we took when we first discovered the trivium and quadrivium as a form of education and a sort of methodology to learn anything for oneself and become autonomous and self-reliant. But without further ado, here's the quote from Dorothy Sayers. Again, this is 1947, delivered at Oxford University. Quote, "It is not the great defect of our education today, a defect traceable through all the disquieting symptoms of trouble that I have mentioned, that although we often succeed in teaching our pupils quote unquote subjects, we fail lamentably on the whole in teaching them how to think. They learn everything except the art of learning. It is as though we had taught a child mechanically and by rule of thumb to play the harmonious blacksmith upon the piano, but had never taught him the scale or how to read music, so that having memorized the harmonious blacksmith, he still had not the faintest notion how to proceed from that to tackle the last rose of summer." Another
so that's outcome-based education. And
Right.
It's like you learn a couple guitar chords, you can play a song, but you don't know how to read or write or really play music. You can just be like a little mechanical box.
And therefore you're dependent on the guitar
Without
teacher
understanding. Right, exactly.
to teach you the new song over and over and over again. Why do I, and now following the rest of this quote here, why do I say as though? In certain of the arts and crafts, we sometimes do precisely this, requiring a child to express himself in paint before we teach him how to handle the colors of the brush. There is a school of thought which believes this to be the right way to set about the job. But observe, it is not the way in which a trained craftsman will go about to teach himself a new medium. He, having learned by experience the best way to economize labor and take the thing by the right end, will start off by doodling about an odd piece of material in order to give himself the feel of the tool. And so the point is, back on screen, is that if you start from the ground up, if you start with the basic understanding of how of the specific trade or sort of value inquiry you're exploring, whether that be learning guitar, learning how to cook, learning how to read or write, learning how to write an essay or a novel, there's a starting place for this. And the starting place is understanding the way the mind organizes, processes, and is able to explain information from which it's exposed through our primary five senses and our perception. And so as she goes on to state the methodology by which, in ancient times and sort of pre-industrial times, you see this a lot in a lot of the better homeschooling systems that are available, where they take pre-industrial sort of educational methods and books that were available, and they utilize that and sort of appropriate it for today's 21st century audience. because it starts from the ground up. It starts from the understanding of we have to build the foundation before we then give them more complex understanding. And so what we do today is we give them the logic. We don't tell them how we get to that logic. We just tell them to memorize it. And they're now nice automatons, just like the book you referenced, Rich, where it said not was a future planning.
Yeah, that's what Carnegie and these globalist internationalists need out of people, for them to be automatons.
It's not for future education, it's for education or schooling in the moment. So each time they're dependent on any XYZ authority. And therefore,
Big Brother can say anything today and they'll have to believe it because they don't have another way to get out of that intellectual trap.
And that's why the number one fallacy, the king of all fallacies, and especially the first one I teach in my course, in my logic course, is ad veracundium, which means appeal to the person or appeal to authority. Well, it really means to appeal to the reverence for the authority. And
it just means you should not consider it as true. And the ability
effect,
to make,
I am the science. There you go. Well, that's what it means.
We need the ability as individuals to make logical, reasonable inferences, make decisions and choices rapidly in life, to be able to move forward, realize mistakes early on, and be able to fix them and keep moving forward in that learning process.
That's right.
Carnegie and Rockefeller and Ford Foundations, the internationalists and the globalists that support them and run with them, they want you not to figure out, not to be able to figure out any of this type of stuff. They need you to hear Fauci saying do some double think, and then you can have their nice little dystopic future that they're continuously unfolding for us.
And when that was exposed in the Reese hearings, the Reese committee, and let's not forget also, there's another massive expose, just out on the tip of my tongue, but the Rockefeller Foundation